welcome to Onyi Singh's Voice Detective. Welcome back, gumshoes. So what's today's case? What is vibrato? Or vibrato. Some people say vibrato, I say vibrato. Without getting into the deeply technical scientific definition, it's basically a rapid slight variation in pitch, so says the Oxford Dictionary. It's a little more than that, but that is the basic definition. In the voice, often vibrato sounds like literal waves, like the sound waves that you think of. That's what vibrato kind of sounds like. So here's an example of straight tone. Ah, that same pitch, but with vibrato. Ah. And vibrato is measured in rate and extent. So we have the vibrato rate and we have vibrato extent. The vibrato rate is how fast or slow the vibrato undulates, or waves. And vibrato extent is how wide or narrow the vibrato is. The less desirable vibrato is often the wider vibrato, the vibrato that has the larger extent. This is the vibrato that often comes with age as well, that slower, more warbly vibrato where you can almost hear the two definite pitches that are creating the vibrato. Sometimes it's considered warbly or wobbly. For example, twinkle, twinkle, little star. And another style of vibrato that is a little less than desirable is the flutter vibrato. However, there are plenty of people who love a flutter vibrato, and it is very much what we're used to hearing in the older Disney movies and things like
after you've gone, there's no denying. You'll feel blue, you'll feel sad.
Just a whisper away, waiting for me. Does he know I'm alive? Do I know if he's real?
So there are plenty of people who do enjoy that. However, more often than not, we tend to like something more in the middle of both the big warbly vibrato and the more narrow fluttery vibrato. So how does vibrato happen? Well, the science on that is still out. It has been the entire time I've been a voice teacher. This is something I've talked about many times for many years. The more I do research on vibrato, the more I find more opportunities to do research on vibrato. The data is extensive and never ending. So there are plenty of great, incredibly educated, intensely intelligent people who disagree about the science of vibrato. Some of the information I find on vibrato has come from texts as far back as before I was born, and even articles that came out maybe a few months ago, and everyone is still trying to figure everything out. There are so many variables. All that is to say, there are many schools of thought on how vibrato happens and the whys of it, but the two that I tend to lean towards are vibrato being the result of oscillating breath, and that is something I even teach as a voice teacher, spinning air, spinning breath. And if you take voice, you might have heard this before, where we want the air to spin out. So when it comes to oscillating air creating vibrato, the idea is that the breath is oscillating, therefore the voice then oscillates. So that's how we get the vibrato wave. The larynx and the folds are relatively stable, but it's the air, the subglottal air, the air coming from below your glottis, so from your lungs and up. That subglottal air is what's oscillating and creating then the vibrato. And so your folds are essentially staying stable. They're still vibrating, that's how you create sound, but they're stable. Whereas the other side of that argument, or the other idea that I also lean towards, it can also be a neurological result of the oscillating of the cricothyroid and other muscles, meaning that the oscillating or the undulating vocal quality is actually coming from the larynx. And in this kind of vibrato, the air pressure is actually balanced with the folds. It's also believed that this is neurological, so it can actually be affected by age. And that makes sense to me because oftentimes the older you get, the slower your vibrato is. And this would also mean the nervous system affects vibrato. And I know for a fact that when I'm nervous or when I'm dealing in fight or flight, if I'm anxious, if I'm excited, my vibrato is faster. You may have experienced that as well in your own life. You might notice that in auditions. For some reason, your vibrato gets like this when you're in an audition when you're dealing with nerves. And so if there is a neurological connection between your voice and vibrato, that would make complete sense that your vibrato would be faster when you're nervous. Also, this is the style of vibrato that would mean it comes from the most natural position of your vocal folds and your larynx. So tensionless singing would then produce a clear and consistent vibrato. And I've noticed that yes, that is in fact the case. Often, more times than not, when my students are singing in their most relaxed position, in their most natural, relaxed, tensionless position, that's when we get their natural vibrato. I've had a few students scare themselves because they didn't know that they had a natural vibrato. Up till now, they had been creating their vibrato. So when you're at your most relaxed and most tensionless, you might find that you're hearing vibration in your voice, even though you're staying nice and relaxed and not trying to sing vibrato. But it starts coming in that relaxed state. And I am a big proponent for do not create vibrato, let it come in naturally at the age it comes in, which also would speak to that neurological aspect to it. And don't push, but rather relax, and then the vibrato will naturally happen. Take all the tension off, and then let the vibrato come through naturally. And there was another study that was really interesting to me, where they discovered that people who couldn't basically relax and allow the vibrato to come through, but were still creating vibrato, when they checked the analysis of what was actually happening physiologically, what they found was that there was oscillating happening, but not through the nervous system, and not through subglottal pressure, but rather from the tongue, the jaw, the palate, and other places that are not meant to be oscillating and creating vibrato. So what that means to me, the voice teacher who's been doing this for too long, is that anytime I've dealt with people who are affecting vibrato, that is usually coming from tension, a tension that they create by creating the oscillation by using muscles to oscillate. So when people couldn't get the relaxed tone to happen and allow vibrato to happen naturally, they then engage the base of the tongue, the soft palate, the jaw. That explains not only the fact that those people affecting that vibrato are creating tension, but also it explains when you see, and I already knew this before, it further explains what you see when you see somebody whose whole body or head shakes when they use vibrato. If there's a lot of tension in the jaw, if there's a lot of tension in the base of the tongue, if there's a lot of tension period, that tension can show up like this. And unfortunately, if you are using this as a way of creating vibrato, then yes, to our ears it sounds like vibrato, but to your body it's violence. And there was a study that showed that certain voices will vibrate better in certain vowels, like the vowel modification or the vowel modulation can also affect the quality of your vibrato. And I know that from personal experience that the good vowels in my voice also produce the best vibrato because I'm the most relaxed and tensionless when I'm singing in those good vowels in my voice. It would make sense that then the vibrato is also really relaxed, really steady, and really consistent. And another interesting thing I found is that there is no such thing as non-vibrato, which is something that people are still kind of fighting about, whether or not that is true or not. It is one of the many theories connected to vibrato, and so there's this idea that we as vocalists, as humans, do not ever sing straight tone or speak in a straight tone. If we were to truly look at the sound wave or the analytics of what our voice is doing when we speak and sing, and we actually held a note for a long period of time, apparently if you really looked at it, you could actually see that our voice is always vibrating, but very narrowly. So essentially the vibrato extent is so small that it's indistinguishable to our ears. And that would also factor into the idea that vibrato comes from the most tensionless, relaxed state, because even when you're not trying, your vibrato should be coming through just incredibly narrowly. We've solved the case! Yay! So now we know what vibrato is and then some. And ultimately it comes down to aesthetic preference, truly. There's no real right or wrong except when it comes to bringing tension to your voice. But as long as you're singing in your healthiest place and it's your natural voice, then if your natural voice happens to be really wide vibrato, really narrow vibrato, really fast vibrato, then those things are okay, and there are people who will enjoy that. Vibrato preference can come from culture as well. I am myself Nigerian, and so in my culture and in many African cultures, the straight tone is the way you sing music. So I personally really love a lot of straight tone in singing when it comes to those kinds of songs that I listen to. And also period, decade, things like that can also affect what is the preference aesthetically for vibrato. So that'll do it for today, and please leave in the comments what kind of vibrato do you prefer. Alright, so I'll see you at our next investigation. Bye! And as this series is specifically the 30-day challenge that I've put upon myself, I want to remind you all to like and subscribe, and feel free to let the algorithm know that there is content here worth watching.